Hello, viewers. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you are. And my name is Okachuku Okori, Editor-in-Chief, Africa World News. You're welcome to my Liberation Gospel. And today I just want to look at COVID-19. The propaganda narratives in Africa. You've seen the way I captioned it, African the propaganda narratives. It's very important for us to begin to realize anyway, I don't need to say that because the world is still in a lockdown state at the moment, and there's fears and anxiety coming up in Africa over preparedness and the attendant problems that are going to arise as a result of the pandemic. But first of all, I want us to take a cursory look, or just let me talk briefly about the propaganda narratives, how it started. Most of us now do understand that the pandemic broke out in Wuhan, in China, and then everybody took it down. It was the issue was really put down. It wasn't really taken serious in many other parts of the world until it came. It traveled all the way from China into this part of the world which I dwell in, and that is the Western countries. And it looks as if it originated here. Unfortunately, it's worse, unlike what we saw in China. The world thought that what happened in China was terrible. I mean, it was gross. Unfortunately, we didn't know that what is coming up here, or what was coming up here, will be worse than we've seen the statistics in countries here in the Western society, and it's enormous. So if you look at this and think about Africa, what's going to happen, the preparedness. But before we come to that, I want to look briefly, just lightly, on the propaganda narratives of this COVID-19. It came out from Wuhan at the tick of the China battle against it. I remember following a the Twitter handle of a Chinese foreign affairs spokesperson who said he just accused the United States Army of smuggling the virus into Wuhan, and it was there. Although the Western media, they just played it down, but few people still carried that, and we're saying what's going to happen. President Trump, on the other angle, from the United States, termed it a China virus. And the propaganda war came up. China accusing the US Army, US accusing China of playing down the enormity of the virus, and things like that. On the sideline too, we still have the Russians who were bystanders. Normally US is a shared adversary of Russia and China, but in this case, although Russia has sent medical help to the United States because of the issue, because the enormity of the pandemic requires concerted effort. The global leaders need to come together to sort this problem, because we can't afford to let our guard in this issue. But we've seen efforts geared towards that, despite the fact that we haven't seen the end of what is coming up. I don't want to paint a terrible picture, but it is important for us to begin to understand a bit of what is being played on the ground. And you understand it from the propaganda narratives of the global leaders over the issue of this COVID-19. China accusing the United States Army of bringing it into China, and the US accusing China of exporting the virus into the rest of the world. There are still countries who have started, murmuring of what is going to happen, reparations and things like that. But many are still battling the pandemic, so they don't have, even the United States, as big as the US and as strong as the US, their case is terrible at the moment. They are fighting the thick of the battle. Was it yesterday? This week, President Trump has requested for more 250 billion or so, to add up to how many trillions that was released by the Congress to fight. We're not talking about the global market meltdown and things, attendant problems coming from this pandemic. In the light of all this, yesterday, Wuhan, the lockdown in Wuhan was lifted. The first outbound train left Wuhan to Guangzhou also. So, and we've seen China has gone back to business. They are now manufacturing PPEs and kits and medical products that are used in fighting, and we've seen them helping different countries. So many people have been saying, what is really going on? China bringing manufacturing a virus and coming back to assist the world to play it down. But we haven't seen the last of the issue. So in this case of where does Africa stand in this battle to flatten this curve, as they would use this kind of idiom or euphemism, to flatten the curve? How does Africa fare in this case? But it is important for us to understand that this pandemic has shown once more battle for supremacy. At the moment, America hasn't really gotten itself, and China is roaring like a bulldozer, though in a subtle way, using international diplomacy, helping out countries. Many of the countries that are helping are not talking about it. They are not reporting it in their mainstream media in order not to offend the United States of America. In order not to offend the United States of America, because most of these countries are used to working with the US. The US has done a lot as the sort of a global policeman, So going with China in this regard, though it's been terrible for many countries, but they have been doing it in a subtle way. They don't want to offend the United States. So where does Africa lie in this issue? In these propaganda narratives, I said, I've talked about the accusations from both sides of the United States and China. Russia is not left out in as much as they've stood as a bystander. There were a couple of media propagandas from their own side, but seeing the enormity of the pandemic, they didn't want to go all out. They've even done well by assisting the US to battle, because US, especially the state of New York, it's been terrible there. Over 300,000, and the US has been affected. This is a pandemic that has infected over 1 million people around the globe. So it's terrible. But like in my last edition, I thought, 1 second. In my last edition, I talked about the statistics of where and where it is in Africa, and it's important. It is important that I still give you updates of today, as at yesterday. I mean, shortly we'll come to that. So far, it's important for us to know that Africa has surpassed the 10,000 mark in this in the battle for to get rid of this coronavirus pandemic. I derive my source on the statistics from the World Health Organization, John Hopkins, and NCOV. Yesterday was 9,000, and but today's Africa has surpassed 10,000 today. As at this morning, it's 10,000. Total confirmed coronavirus cases in Africa stands at 10,427 patients at the cases. Sorry, and there have been recoveries. We mustn't fail to understand that there've been recoveries, and 1,074 recoveries so far. They've recovered from the attack of the virus, and there have been deaths. 519 are dead. And it's only one country in Africa that is yet to get a case, and that is Lesotho, landlocked Lesotho. You can Google Lesotho and know more about it. It's a landlocked country. So far, South Africa has the highest rates of confirmed coronavirus case, and their mark stands at 1,749. So in flattening this curve in the continent, what are the national response plans from African countries? What are their plans? It's important to know the plans, because it's terrible. Leadership across the continent has been terrible. We have to face the facts. African leaders have been disappointing us in many ways, because if big and rich countries in Western society will be overwhelmed, if they are overwhelmed with this pandemic, then how are African countries going to be affected? So that is the fear of everyone. Even the World Health Organization has been troubled talking about it. How is Africa going to fare in this pandemic, as Africa is the last place now that it's coming up already. Europe, in Americas and Asia, they've been battling the pandemic. I have to say that many of these countries are flattening the curve. They are trying to check the expansion, as in this widespread of the pandemic. So, with the way Africa is, how is the continent prepared to tackle this pandemic? It is important for us to mention here that even in many countries, they don't have respiratory equipment. They don't have kits. I was looking at World Health Organization, the regional office in Africa, what the statistics there, the preparedness of African countries. You can imagine a country like Nigeria that have about 200 million people. They don't have up to 500 ventilators. So if the pandemic hits there, how is it going to be? It will be a disaster. So this is why we are getting worried, and now the leadership is getting more exposed. We've seen the problems, the inherent problems in African leadership. It's going to rear its ugly head here, because in the case of Nigeria, a country that is even very rich, but the issue of corruption always comes up. Recently, even while many countries were battling the deadly virus, the National Assembly legislators they were importing exotic cars. That's even one of the car. Nigeria has about the lower house, 300 or more than that legislators. They got exotic cars for each and every one of them at the cost of over $30,000 per car. And this kind of money can be used to sort out the health sector, but unfortunately, that will not be the same. We've seen over this period of lockdown that have been affected by many countries in Africa as they gear up to battle this pandemic. In Africa, we've seen the issue of people's food, groceries, means of livelihood. How are they going to survive in this issue? If rich countries in the West, countries that have good healthcare system, are overwhelmed, how are Africa going to battle this? There's a particular case in Zimbabwe. I was looking at the young man is a media guy, what's his name, Zororo Makamba. I was looking at this case who died from this coronavirus. He's just age 30. Unfortunately, you can imagine Zimbabwe, of all places, didn't have any respirator kit. There was no ventilator for the young man. In the hospital, he was helpless. And he just died. Despite the fact that before his death, he was a media personality. Let's say he's a Zimbabwean celebrity. He's a son of a business mogul. And he just died like that because there was no ventilator for him, let alone the ordinary African. If this young man at 30 died, let alone ordinary Africans or the elderly or those who have health issues, how are they going to survive? So these are our fears. It is important that we begin to think about this and how to flatten this curve, as they would say. Looking beyond the blame game or the propaganda narrative between the United States and China, Africa has to brace up to battle this novel virus. This time we mustn't look at our political problems or differences, because once it spreads, it's going to affect everyone. We've seen that many are touched, even in the Western society here. It's taking prominent people. So it's not what it's not a sickness that will say selects victims. But if there's concerted effort and well laid out national response plans, I think it can be contained, because many countries are beginning to contain theirs, despite the high degree of loss of lives. Look at, if I start giving you the statistics of, you can imagine some days countries lost more than 1,000, even hundreds. It's disastrous. It's a disaster. My generation haven't seen this kind of thing before, and it's terrible. So in Africa's quagmire, how will African countries, nations, handle this? Because I'm sure that many countries will be helpless if this spreads rapidly, because we'll be seeing the way people are dying. I know there are conspiracy theories. Some people will say it's not conspiracy theories. Some people are saying many things relating the outbreak of this virus to 5G. Maybe on another day I'll look at that. But I'm just thinking of how African countries are going to respond to this. We'll have many cases, many issues here to respond, where not only the health issues, what about the food sustenance? People are locked down in their place. How are they going to survive? How will government structure distribution of relief materials without being biased or being political, as they usually do? We've seen that in Nigeria, whereby some states are giving grants on aid, whereas other states are ignored. This development doesn't augur well for the society. It's terrible. We need to find a way to work together to tackle this pandemic. And I think leadership this time must be, we must reckon having the obligation or understanding that one of leadership qualities is the obligation to protect our people. Because without the people, who are you going to lead? If we start losing people the way this virus is taking souls in this part of the world, it will be terrible for Africa, because the health system is poor in many countries, and it's going to ravage across through the population, the deaths. So, and this is what we pray against. So, in looking at the propaganda narratives, Africa must go beyond that. And we mustn't wait for America or China to take the initiative in protecting our people, because we've seen that nations were helpless. They are still helpless in this circumstance. We've seen the issues between America and even Canada on the question of ventilators, that America diverted ventilators and it couldn't reach them. So, and many other things that they've been accusing. So you wouldn't blame nations. They want to save their citizens first. That is the law of nature, is you save yourself first before you start saving. In my place, there's a proverb that says that you have to get a ground before you spread the mat. You can't think of spreading the mat without possessing a portion of the land. So we must come together, put our hands together, and assist one another, obey government directives first on this issue. I know a lot of people are bringing up narratives. Some are saying it's conspiracy theories, and they even are talking about the 5G involvement in this, but I said I'm going to talk about it on another series. For want of time, it is important for us to look beyond the propaganda narratives between China and America, each accusing each other. But we are watching closely. As events unfold, we're going to know the truth. But before then, we must get prepared to save our people. We must adhere to instructions before we know whether it's a conspiracy theory or not, or because it's already killing people in thousands. So it's a deadly virus, whatever we call it, it's a deadly virus. So we must find a way to flatten or even straighten the curve. If we can straighten it, we flatten it. We make sure that it doesn't. At the moment, the case is growing up in Africa. The virus is spreading. It's coming up gradually. But we can, if we come together, we can do a lot to nip it in the bud. So for the case of Zororo Makamba, it should be a case study. May his soul rest in peace, but it should be a case study for Africa, for someone of that magnitude in Zimbabwe to just die carelessly, because there was no ventilator in the whole country. According to his relatives, they said calls that were put through to the presidency was not answered. They weren't even So the death of the young man was like a wake-up call for Zimbabwe. And I think we should use it as a wake-up call for Africa too, so that African countries can begin to get to be at alert. It is very important that we must shelve all our unpreparedness, then look at how we can even manufacture personal protective equipment, the PPEs. And I know if we had robust leadership, most of these things we can produce them locally. PPEs, we can, for instance, in Nigeria, the Aba, the commercial city of Aba, they've been making immediately this issue came up. They started making face masks. I saw that online, it was going viral everywhere. Even the ventilators, the Nigerian car manufacturer, Innocent, I read his statement in which he demanded for a certain amount to convert his motor equipment to making ventilators. But, a lot of politics going on, playing politics with everything, including human life. And when people die, who are you going to lead? So imagine such a car manufacturer telling the federal government of Nigeria to come to his assistance so that he can start manufacturing ventilators for would-be patients or victims of coronavirus, but it wasn't heard. Nobody listened to him. So in this propaganda narratives, we must begin to get to be aware, because at the end of the day, the fight is for global leadership between America and China. We have not heard the last between both. Africa must be at alert. We mustn't wait for our leaders. Most of these leaders were not elected. They will just impose themselves on our people, the barrel of the gun. So we've seen what's happened. Even China, that have been sending kids to some country. These kids were returned that it wasn't functional. The same China is, I don't know what's the kind of agreement they are having. China is sending them PPEs, equipment to combat this coronavirus. We just hope that this equipment will be working in good condition. So far, we must make concerted efforts to assist one another, assist our people back home, wherever you are. You have a role to play, and you must have to be careful and dig deep. Everyone, we must be vigilant in these uncertain times, so that we know what is really happening. Because at the end of the day, Africa is always bearing the brunt. Where two elephants fight, the grass suffers. It's all about who controls the world and the resources. I mean, we have given the West a lot. We've given them hundreds of years. Through slavery, built all the resources in Africa. I mean, they've been enjoying it, using it to their benefit. We can't continue to keep quiet. We must come together and save our people. We must rise. We have a lot in common. I mean, we mustn't wait for foreigners to come and sort us out. So, brothers and sisters, whoever listens to me, I want you to send this message out. Look at the propaganda already. Is going between the two countries, America and China, with Russia by the side. It is all on how to lead this world. Even when the lead has issues, they want to ram it down on us. But we have to be vigilant on this coronavirus era, or in this coronavirus era, so that we will not be let off guard. Whatever happens, we must be vigilant so that we will not be caught off guard. Thank you for listening to me. My name is Okachuku Okori, editor Africa World News. Be on alert. We will inform you on our social media sources on subsequent edition of My Liberation Gospel. God bless you.